So there are a lot of diagnoses under uh, the section on personality disorders, and I just want to go over a few of them in depth for you. I do have notes on obsessive compulsive disorder. Um, Now, here's an offer I would like to make for anybody who wants to take me up on it. Um, I provided notes for all of the most common disorders throughout the semester that I thought you might encounter. But some of the other disorders that are not as common, I do not have notes for. If you would like to follow kind of all of my notes have major categories. If you want to follow those categories with the DSM, the write-up on the DSM, the criteria, and a little research, because we're going to need some statistics and some treatment in each of the notes. But if you would like to do some notes, pick any of the disorders that I do not have notes on, and I will give you 2 bonus points towards the class. You can only do 1 set of notes, only 2 points, and you have to let me know which ones you would like to provide, because I don't want more than one person doing the same disorder. So, and this not only benefits me, but I will provide your notes to the class and to all future classes. So it helps everybody. And it acts as a study guide for you as well. All right, so just email me which ones you'd like to do. I'll make sure nobody else is doing them, get back to you. And by the end of the summer semester, if you have those notes, I will post them and give you your 2 points. All right, so on with the diagnoses. So I do have OCD, which we will go over, but I want to start at the beginning of this section for personality disorders. Now, I have a couple personal reservations about this section, only because I think a lot of individuals, not only students, but therapists as well, find it a bit confusing. And there are 2 things that I believe people find confusing. The first one is, why aren't some other diagnoses included under personality disorders? A few more than these may fit their theme for why do we put disorders in this specific section. But I think the most important thing that I found personally confusing is the schizoid personality disorder. Now, this is not in the same section as schizophrenia. So I'm wondering, okay, well, let's look at this one first, okay? And let's try to figure out the differences and the pervasive pattern of detachment from social relationships and a restricted range of expression of emotions in interpersonal settings, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 4 or more of the following. Number 1, neither desires nor enjoys close relationships, including being part of a family. Almost always chooses solitary activities. Has little, if any, interest in having sexual experiences with another person. Takes pleasure in few, if any, activities. Lacks close friends, confidence other than first-degree relatives, appears indifferent to the praise or criticism of others, shows emotional coldness, detachment, a flattened affectivity. And B, doesn't occur exclusively during the course of schizophrenia. So it does not talk a lot about delusions or hallucinations. It primarily talks about social relationships or making attachments. Now, schizotypal personality disorder, just to differentiate, a pervasive pattern of social and interpersonal deficits marked by acute discomfort with and reduced capacity for close relationships, as well as by cognitive or perceptual distortions and eccentricities of behavior, beginning by early adulthood, present in a variety of contexts, indicated by 5 or more of the following. So this criteria includes a list of ideas of reference, including delusions of reference, odd beliefs or magical thinking that influence behavior, and an inconsistent and subcultural norm, unusual perceptual experiences, including bodily illusions, odd thinking and speech, vague, circumstantial, metaphorical, over-elaborate, or stereotyped, suspiciousness or paranoid ideation, inappropriate or constricted affect, behavior or appearance that is odd, eccentric, or peculiar, lack of close friends or confidence other than first-degree relatives, excessive social anxiety that does not diminish with familiarity and tends to be associated with paranoid fears rather than negative judgments, does not occur exclusively during the course of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder or depressive disorder with psychotic features, another psychotic disorder, or autism spectrum disorder. So these are very, very close to schizophrenia, especially schizotypal. So I would simply make sure to differentiate between the two when making a diagnosis. But here again, one is in the personality disorders and the other is not. Now, as we look at these personality disorders, they have different clusters. They have cluster A, cluster B, cluster C. That was cluster A. Okay, so let's look at cluster B. The main reason I brought that up is there's a lot of debate as to why is that not categorized more closely with schizophrenia. All right, cluster B, personality disorders. So here's antisocial personality, borderline personality, histrionic personality, narcissistic personality. I mainly want to focus on borderline. So I want to give you my personal take on, related to my personal experience with clients who have been diagnosed borderline personality disorder. I also posted a video and they use dialectic theory. If you ever get a chance, look up the founder of that theory. And sometimes people say, well, she also suffered from this. So it's very interesting, the whole story behind that treatment. I don't personally use dialectical theory myself, but other people have found it very helpful. So I wanted to post a video on it, someone talking about it that knows a lot more about it than I do. But let me give you my own personal experience and my own theory with borderline personality disorder, and then we'll go to the DSM itself, because it's different than my personal thoughts. My personal thoughts will not be on an exam. I just wanted to share them with you. So in my mind, through my own therapeutic experience with clients, one of the trait themes, or the thematic traits, seems to be perpetual manipulation of other human beings and therapists. So an example would be somebody with this disorder has been in therapy for an extended period of time. They have learned exactly what to say that the therapist wants to hear. And even though they say this, it doesn't mean they're going to follow through with it. They are able to manipulate other people in other kinds of relationships, whether they are personal relationships, friendships, significant others, business relationships. But that is usually also what brings an end to the relationship, this pattern of manipulation. Now, why do I think this occurs in the beginning? I think there is most likely a relationship between this manipulation and Erickson's very first stage and Bowlby's first stage of attachment. So Erickson's stage is trust versus mistrust. Bowlby's stage has to do with attachment theory. And from years of working with children and adults and CYS and family services, I've noticed that one of the most important things is to build attachment at a very early age. Now, one of the first things in our culture, in American culture, I know there's many subcultures, but in American culture in general, when we think about attachment, one of the big things that detracts from that attachment bond is often addiction. If parents are addicted to a drug like heroin or something like that, crystal meth, their focus is on that drug and that addiction. So many times those very first needs for bonding and love and trust and getting all the basic needs met are not found. So those attachment bonds aren't as strong as they really should be. So that often leads to reactive attachment disorder, or RAD. And some of the symptoms of that are that people do not trust others, and they feel as though they need to get their own needs met. They also have a lack of empathy, which results in a lack of guilt. They do not allow themselves to become vulnerable or to trust, or as a result, to love fully. So there is some stunted emotional progress there. And all of those things end up leading to, they still believe they should get their needs met, whatever that might be. But, it is often through manipulation. Now, that's just a generalization. Not everyone is like this, but I've experienced it quite a bit. So let's look at what the DSM says. All right, so borderline personality disorder a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image and affects, and marked impulsivity, beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. Number 1, frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. 2, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extreme of idealization and devaluation. Identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image of self. Impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially damaging, like spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. Number 5, recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, self-mutilating behavior. 6, affective instability due to a marked reactivity of mood, chronic feelings of emptiness, inappropriate intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, transient stress-related paranoid ideation. So it never uses the word manipulation, but you can see that a lot of those criteria could fit kind of my hypothesis. I'm wondering if any of you have any experience with this diagnosis, if you see similar things. Let's look quickly at narcissistic personality disorder. And of course, a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, fantasy or behavior, a need for admiration, lack of empathy, beginning at early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, grandiose sense of self-importance. That's probably the primary one. Preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, ideal love. Often I would see this as overcompensation. Believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people. Requires excessive admiration. There's more in that list, but think about being, having to be the center of attention. You know, that's what I think of when I think about narcissism. In cluster C, we have dependent personality disorder, and that is fairly common. One that is not as serious as dependent is codependency. There's a book called Codependent No More. I believe this has more to do with Bowen's family systems theory and multi-generational family systems. But it kind of ties into this as well. But let's look at OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. So it is important that you understand the difference between obsessions and compulsions. So obsessions are recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges, or images that seem to invade a person's consciousness. So attempts are made to ignore or suppress such thoughts, urges, or images with other thoughts or actions. Compulsions. Compulsions are repetitive behaviors or mental acts that a person feels compelled to perform in order to prevent or reduce anxiety or distress. I believe there is an aspect of magical thinking that goes into this. So, for instance, you know, I cannot step on a crack or I will break my mother's back. Well, that's a childhood game, but people might believe that if I do this, something bad will happen as a reaction, and that is magical thinking. So that's the difference between obsessions and compulsions. So obsessive thoughts, compulsive acts, that's the way I remember it. So if we look at a differential diagnosis, most but not all of the diagnosed with OCD have both obsessive and compulsions, obsessions and compulsions. So when we think about obsessions, thoughts that feel both intrusive or foreign to those who experience them, attempts to ignore them kind of heighten the thoughts. So it's almost like the more we try not to think about them, the more present and annoying they are. And they are often connected with compulsions, but obsessions include wishes for something, impulses, urges to yell out obscenities in an inappropriate place, images, fleeting visions of forbidden things, ideas, notions that germs are lurking everywhere and that they're going to hurt us, doubts like making the wrong decisions. Most common seem to be thoughts of dirt or contamination. Other themes are orderliness, religion, sexuality. Compulsive behaviors are technically under voluntary control, though the individual seems to have little control over the matter. They believe they are not under their control. They may feel that something terrible will happen if they don't follow through with the action. If they do not follow through, anxiety heightens. Some acts may develop into compulsive rituals, so things that they do over and over again. I have to turn the light on and off, the light switch on and off 3 times before I am able to leave a room. Rituals include touching or not touching, verbal rituals or counting. Compulsive acts are often a response of obsessive thoughts, so they're often connected. So this is a disorder that I highly recommend medication because it's been very successful. It doesn't completely eliminate it, but it vastly improves individuals' lives. And I would always recommend medication along with therapy. When we look at some of the etiology, 1 to 2% of children and adolescents have OCD. And remember, OCD is not the same as anal retentiveness. It is much more severe. It is a chemical imbalance. It is not just a habit. It's more common among boys than girls, 2 to 1. It's moderately heritable, appears to run in families. It's viewed as neuropsychiatric disorder caused by abnormalities in brain structures, functioning, I would say brain chemicals as well. Neuropathway, known as the corticostriatal thalamic circuit, has been particularly important in studying this disorder, but we don't fully understand it. Serotonin likely plays a role in the symptomology caused by excessively high levels. Treatments include a combination of medication and therapy. Primary medications include clomipramine, fluoxetine, fluvoxamine, anafranil, Prozac, Luvox. Behavioral therapy, they've seen mixed results. Some people have seen very positive results. I listed a couple studies that showed some positive results. A combination of these would most likely be ideal.